it's Jamie at Auto Checkers, and today I've got a bit of a sad story. This particular vehicle behind me belongs to a mother. She's got a few kids, and well, she bought this vehicle. It's a Ford IMAX. She bought this vehicle as an ex-demonstrator vehicle, and from the start, according to her, she's always had a bit of a suspension noise that she couldn't quite figure out. Well, she didn't say suspension noise. I figured it would be suspension noise. She's always had this noise that her service center couldn't fix. And she's been going to a local Taiwanese service center, and unfortunately they haven't done a really good job. I'm not going to say which one it was. I know which one it was, but I'm not going to mention it. I don't think it's worth it. And it's not like this kind of service is limited to this one particular service center anyway, so it doesn't really make sense just to single them out. Anyway, she learned that I was repairing cars in Taiwan, and she's a British expat, and she thought she'd come along and get my opinion on her car. Also, the fact that her car had pretty much broken down, the engine check light kept coming on. Fortunately, I asked her to check the water before she drove over, and sure enough, there wasn't any water in the radiator, so there was probably a coolant leak. So she topped it off, got the car over here, fortunately without seizing the engine or anything. So I just put this car up a height, and I just started to check the car from top to tail, as I do with most new vehicles, or I should say new customers with their vehicles. When they come in here and they've been to other service centers, first thing I do is basically check all the basics and make sure that everything's okay. Well, obviously in this case it's not. Anyway, I'm just going to show you around the car, and this is a bit of a message to people who think that as long as they get their car serviced and everything should be in check. That may be the case in other places, but I think as long as you're in Taiwan, and I've had some experience in China as well, that's more often than not the case. When you go for a service here, they'll change your oil, and that's about it. They almost never check anything else. I can't speak for every single service center, of course, but I hear more often than not these kind of complaints from people that they can't believe what state their vehicles ended up in, having been to a local service center. And there are probably more complaint stories that I hear than people singing the praises of the mechanic. Anyway, let's get on with it, and I'll just show you some of the faults that I found on this vehicle in literally like 5 minutes. And I haven't checked everything yet, but I've just checked the basic major systems. So here we go. Okay, so the very first thing I did was check the radiator, and we've got a radiator leak. I don't have to show you where that is. It's just a split radiator. Second thing I did was check the service items. This was the filter. This is the air filter, of course, the engine air filter, which is it's probably 60% clogged. So the engine won't be breathing properly with a filter like that in it. I'm going to change that. What else have we got? So immediately upon jacking up the vehicle, I found it had an oil leak, and it's the oil cooler on the front of the engine is leaking oil everywhere. I don't know if that filter's just picked up dirt recently, but that looks like that filter's been on there for a long time, long enough for all the paint to peel off the back of it. So I don't even know if it's had an oil filter change in the past. I don't know if we can see it here. The radiator's pretty corroded. If I let my camera focus a bit, can we do that? Not really, sorry. Anyway, the radiator is pretty corroded, and the top of the radiator is split, and it's leaking fluid from there. In addition to that, okay, suspension noise that could never be fixed. Alright, so pretty obvious stuff. I'm sorry I'm shaking around so much today, and that this doesn't really seem to be focusing too well. And now my LED light's going off. I guess the battery is getting low. Alright, anti-roll bar. that is the suspension noise. The rubbers are completely worn out. In addition to the rubbers being worn out, the anti-roll bar end links, there's a lot of play in those. Probably the rubbers went first. They put too much stress on the end links and they've worn out pretty quickly. I haven't got my screwdriver in my hand. If I had, I'd show you that the suspension arm bushings on the rear are split. I don't know if you can see that, but trust me, they're split. What else have we got? Oh, this is great. This is hilarious. So on the back of the car, move to the back. So another very bizarre. Oh shit, my light's gone out. Oh, it's battery flat. Battery flat. Okay, sorry. Oh, I guess you can see a little bit. On the back of the car, anti-roll bar end link is entirely disconnected. This wasn't even screwed on. And I don't know if you can see that, but there aren't even any threads on here anymore. Even if I wanted to screw it on, I couldn't. So the anti-roll bar end links at the back have to be replaced. The anti-roll bar rubbers, a lot of people do this. They put on these Jubilee clips to tighten down the anti-roll bar so that it can't slide in and out of the rubber anymore, because the rubber's so worn that the bar just slides in and out. If I take these off, as I slackened this one off earlier, I could actually move the whole anti-roll bar around. So those rubbers are shot as well. So this is the top of the engine. The battery is leaking out and it is corroded all over the top of the battery. That's not very nice. No coolant left. We've got some brown staining on the exterior drive belt. This particular drive belt drives the, let's see, what have we got? Water pump. I think that's it. Oh, and the alternator. It's got a separate belt for, I can't quite see. I can't see from here, sorry. Oh, the air conditioning. Separate belt for the air conditioning pump. This brown staining usually gives you a clue that something is worn, and it could be this tensioner pulley. I'm going to have to take the belt off later and check that this tensioner pulley bearing is okay. I suspect that it's probably shot. We can see rust inside the tensioner bearing pulley. It's a plastic pulley, but it's got a metal bearing on the inside. And usually when you see this brown staining, it's a clue that you've got a bearing or something's shot in that system. Obviously the belt runs around so many different pulleys. It could be any one of those pulleys, but as this top pulley seems to be the dirtiest, and this is the idler or the tensioner pulley, I'm suspecting this is probably the one that's gone. So I have to release the belt tension in a minute and spin this and listen for any noise. I suspect that that's completely shot. Okay, as I've mentioned before on Mazda 5s, sorry we can't see it, my light's gone. This right-hand engine mount, when I say right-hand, I mean the right-hand side of the car. Okay, so it doesn't matter what country you're coming from. This is the right-hand side of the car. That's the left-hand side of the car. The right-hand side engine mounting on this particular model, it's the same on all Mazda 5s, Ford iMacs, which is the same car principally, and is only sold in Taiwan. And the Mazda 3 2.0, the 2 liters, these are oil-filled engine mountings, and they split, and the oil leaks out, and then they sink, they collapse, and then you end up with the inner engine mounting and the outer bracket contacting, and you get huge vibrations. Usually when this one goes, if you don't repair it quickly, the one on the left-hand side, which we can't see here, you can only see from looking up from the underside of the vehicle. That's a solid rubber bushing. It's not oil-filled, but it's a solid rubber bushing, and that one eventually splits, which on this vehicle it has done. So that one's split as well. So with the engine vibrating a lot, we might expect eventually as well to we might expect eventually that might damage any connecting components, any solid hoses, if they have solid hoses, or the exhaust system. So you have to double check the exhaust system. You don't want your engine vibrating around for too long. The reason that you have rubber mountings on the engines are to reduce the vibration, obviously to even the passenger cabin, which becomes very uncomfortable if you can feel all the vibrations from the engine. But they actually protect some of the components that are either solidly connected to the engine, like the exhaust, as I said, or components that are subsequently joined through other components to the engine. That's my project for the day, and let's see how we get on with it. I might update you a little bit later with some progress, hopefully with some good news as well. Hi everyone, this is Jamie again, and just giving you an update on the Ford IMAX job that just came in. And basically this is, what now? This is like day 3, I think. What actually happened was I called a friend over and we wanted to do this really nice woman a favor and try and get her car ready for her as quickly as possible. We actually had this car done a couple of days ago. I was trying to get her down here to have a look at it, but she couldn't make it. She's been busy. And so we kept it till now, but it's done anyway, and it's going back today. I just thought I'd show you some of the components that were taken off the car, and so hopefully use this car to serve as a lesson to everybody else to really pay attention to their own service center and the things they may or may not be doing to their vehicle. Okay, so as I said before, a common complaint in Taiwan is that service centers do a pretty poor job of servicing cars. And this was no exception. This was pretty much the epitome of all of that. So, alright, basic stuff. Let's just get into it. This was the oil filter that came off. Now, I would say from experience, looking at this thing, I think you can see that. This thing has never been changed, I think that's safe to say. The seal is completely compacted. That's been on there for a very long time. And I believe eventually was the cause of an oil leak at the oil filter housing / cooler. The oil cooler was leaking oil everywhere. I think there was too big of a pressure buildup because the oil couldn't pass through the filter anymore. It was completely clogged. And it blew the seal in the cooler, so we've replaced that seal. I don't have the original seal to show you, and to be honest, you probably couldn't see how it was defective anyway on camera here. This is the air filter, and bearing in mind this has had a service not very long ago, so you know, check that out. The engine is obviously not breathing properly, so that's had to go. I showed you that rusty pulley assembly, the exterior belt. Yeah, you remember the brown stuff all over the belt? Okay, well that's this pulley here. This is the idler, tensioner pulley at the very top, the one that I pointed to and said that I suspected that it had gone because it has all this brown stuff all around it. Okay, well it has. Listen. Alright, so that was completely shot. That would have eventually just seized up, basically, and snapped the belt. So, fortunately, we got away with changing that before anything catastrophic happened. Both the suspension, this only has these bushings on the front suspension. These are the front suspension, rear bushings. So these have been hacked out, okay? They weren't as bad as this, but they were split. And so these have been changed out. There are 2 of those, this is just one. What else? So you remember on the back of the car it had that completely disconnected anti-roll bar end link. Okay, so we've changed the end links and there was so much play in them. Well, I mean, it didn't really matter if it was disconnected, but there was a lot of play in them anyway. So we've changed those, as well as the front anti-roll bar end links as well. A couple of them here I think the other side was worse. A couple of them were seriously worn and grating, kind of really seized and grating, and a couple of them are really loose and vibrating. So we've changed those. This was pretty hilarious. Okay, so these are the front anti-roll bar bushings, and as we can see, I don't know if you can see that. Okay, completely worn through, like they're barely even holding together anymore. So that whole anti-roll bar assembly is just shaking around like mad. We've changed those. What else have we got? Oh, we've got a couple of things over there I'm going to go and get for you. You'll like this one. Okay, so in addition to those noises, oh, I got another thing as well to show you. Hang on. Okay. So, in addition to all that noise that would have been caused by all of those problems, we've also got this, and this is hilariously, it's kind of pathetically hilarious, but the engine mountings. Okay, this is one, this is the left-hand side one, and I mentioned that on especially the Mazda 5, the Mazda 3, the 2-litre versions, and that includes the Ford iMax, which is basically the same engine mountings. This is a fluid-filled engine mount. This wasn't just collapsed, this was completely disconnected. In fact, if I push this hard enough, I could just pop this out with my hand. The engine was just resting in place. It was entirely disconnected from the car. This is the left-hand engine mount, and this is the one that I couldn't show you earlier because this was hidden down under all those air boxes in the battery area. So this is the left-hand engine mounting, and this one is, in fact, 2 pieces as well. As I say, this engine completely disconnected basically. There are only 2 mountings on this particular engine. In my opinion, it's not enough. It's a big engine, it's 2 litres, it's got plenty of torque. It should really have more mountings. This is a bad design on this vehicle, and so I'm often changing this right-hand engine mount all the time. And when that one goes as badly as this, the left-hand one really follows pretty quickly. So it'll just shear the engine mountings, which is exactly what's happened here. What else? Oh my goodness, this one took me a long time to figure out. Okay, so after fixing all that, I road tested the car, and I still had this clatter, clatter, clatter noise in it. I couldn't quite pinpoint it at first, and it took me quite a few times putting the car up, checking out where I thought the noise might be coming from. Couldn't find anything, put the car back together, drove it out, the noise was still there. It took me quite a bit of diagnosis to figure out eventually what this clattering noise was. And in the end I had somebody else drive the car, and I just followed the car behind. And I could hear that the noise was coming from it was the left-hand rear wheel. It's insignificant really, but it was coming from the back of the car, one of the hub assemblies. So I put the car up again, and I started to dismantle this rear hub assembly. Well, I took the brake caliper off the rear. This one's got rear discs. I took the brake caliper off, and as I took the brake caliper off, one of the brake pads dropped out. Seemed pretty loose. So I picked it up and I checked it, and it had these marks. And this isn't the worst one actually, this is from the other side that wasn't so noisy. But you can see these marks on the face of the pad, hopefully, if the camera's in focus, which I can't tell because it's on my phone. So, you see this shiny mark? Okay. What's happened here is that this has been to this terrible service center, and they've put in a set of brake pads. These are not the brake pads for this vehicle. These are the wrong pads. And these pads simply wouldn't fit into this vehicle. So what they've done is they've used a grinder, and they've ground the face of the pad to remove these 2 sort of knoblets, if you like. I'm not quite sure the terminology for these things, but there are 2 protrusions from the pad surface, and these protrusions would be for a particular model caliper, and they would fit against the piston, or they would slot into the piston for that particular type of caliper. Well, this one doesn't have those calipers. This is the wrong brake pad. So they've ground those off, and they've just slapped these brake pads in. Well, they don't fit. There's far too much play. They were kind of working, but this was really a hodgepodge job. And so what was happening was the brake pads were just sitting in the assembly, and they were just rattling around aggressively. So much so that, I mean, I'd never heard this type of noise before, and why would you, right? Because who would put the wrong pads in their car knowingly, you know? So this surprised me a little. It didn't surprise me that much, having found all of these other issues on the car that the same service center would put the wrong pads in the car, but that's what they did. And so she did mention when she brought the car in that she had this noise, well, I'm not sure which noise she was describing, but it was a noise that she said she'd had for a while, and she couldn't pinpoint it.